Okay, hello and welcome everybody to New Earth Consciousness. Tanya here, and I'm live with Laura Westman, who is a creativity coach. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this interview for quite some time. I have not had anybody on this channel talking about the importance of creativity, imagination, play. We talked a lot about the kind of rabbit hole that people can get stuck in, the cycle of healing and fixing and, you know, and not making space for this other thing that is actually a human need, which is play. So share with us, tell me about your journey. Like, you're in New York, right?
Yeah.
And where did you start out in your journey, and what led you into this specific niche?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. I love the work that you're up to. I love everything on your channel. I'm so happy that we've had the chance to connect, and it surprises me that I'm the first person here to talk about creativity and imagination because it seems so perfectly dovetailing the kind of work that you do and what you stand for. So I'm honored and really happy to get to kind of open up this conversation here. So I live in New York now in the Hudson Valley, which is we live about 90 minutes north of Manhattan, and I did live in Manhattan about 8 years, and before that, I lived in Washington D.C., where I graduated from college. But I actually grew up in North Carolina, and I've been thinking a lot about it recently through the lens of my relationship with creativity, actually, because um, I feel like recently I've completed a pretty big healing cycle that started maybe 3 or 4 years ago,
Mm.
and I realize my experience of my creativity now, it's very different. It's a very different kind of flow, like, it has a different voice, it has a different forcefulness, But the reason why I bring that up is because there are some times when I've been in a very intense space for healing and creativity, which often feels like the thing that's not allowed when we're working really hard on ourselves. I actually have found it to be probably one of the most wonderful anchors.
Mm. Mm.
And it has me reflecting a lot recently on some of my early uh, memories of being creative as a kid in Durham, North Carolina, with my, two adorable parents. I was born in '88, so this was the '90s.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that my mom said to me once, and I say this with love and reverence for my mother because she said this to me kind of tongue in cheek, but she said, during that time, the books on parenting were mostly focused on like whatever works for you as a parent, So that has a very interesting impact on those of us growing up during that time, But a lot of the memories that I have, and some of I think are very core experiences of like forming me as a person are creative activities or memories, building stuff with my dad, singing songs at the piano. Like there's all these like very lovely, fun, imaginative, playful things that we got to do. And I feel so grateful for those memories. And so I bring this up because first of all, I think it's relevant, but secondly, because the lately, like as I've been kind of entering a new chapter, I've been having all of these lovely dreams and memories and just like little flashes of life during that time when my creativity felt very free and abundant.
Mm.
It's probably like I think the age that's coming back now is probably around like 9. So that's for me 4th grade. And yeah, it's just a special time, special memories. So I've always been very I love to make things. I love to perform. I think my inner creative child just loves to make and she loves to talk about what she makes. She's not competitive. She just enjoys. And I think that when it comes to my journey, a pretty big part of my story when it comes to my creativity, really, when I was maybe 17, I got vocal nodules developing.
Mhm.
And it was a bit of a dream killer at the time because I was singing a lot and I was planning on going to performing arts college. And it was one of those things where um, I think nobody told me I shouldn't go audition, but I got a pretty clear message that this is not available anymore. And it kind of shut down this part of me pretty fast.
Mm.
So I went from feeling very at home on stage and very confident to feeling like suddenly that's a place where I don't belong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That must have been a hard hit. And was that really true?
I think that it felt true.
Yeah.
And it took a long time of there was the component of like being able to be in a place where I could do the work to physically heal my voice, which took a really long time. So I was so disconnected from my body. That's how I created the notes in the first place, was that
Mm,
disconnection and that trying to sound like somebody else.
mm, mm,
And even when I was, not getting a performing arts degree, I actually have a degree in political science, I was still hanging on. I still found ways to I would get those needs met. It wasn't quite the same. I did student theater instead of main stage theater, or I that's how I got into improv actually was because I was looking for an outlet that wouldn't depend on a consistent performance. So if I was having a bad vocal day, I could still improvise.
right.
There's nothing riding on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I definitely I ended up falling so much in love with improv that I became an instructor. And that was actually how I got into coach training because I just loved watching these adult people. This is in Washington, D.C. So most of my improv students are working professionals in the halls of Congress, like they're at the IMF, like they have these big jobs and they need a place to go and play. And I just watched them relearn how to play again. And it was just so satisfying, like that's a different person walking out on the end of that intro to improv class. And I just became really like addicted to that transformation. And so that's one thing led to another. That's how I became a coach. And then um, the world of running your own coaching business, especially when you're, mid 20s, young,
Mhm.
um, I think that the more that I started talking to people about their dreams and the things that they loved, you kind of can't help but review how is it for me, So I think most of my 20s was just this like being kind of softly lulled back into the arms of my creativity little by little. And now I'm really happy to say that I have a healthy voice. My second album is coming out, and I really like pulled the pin on creating a lot of like creativity coaching courses and stuff to kind of help people find their way back in a way that's really intentional and also gentle because you'll have to tell me your experience of this. I think that most grown-ups, what we are really wanting is a sense of belonging to ourselves and a sense of peace and stability and joy.
Mhm.
But we think that the way to get that is by forcing ourselves to be different and do things differently, like hard work.
Yeah.
And I think our creative self is more like a child and more usually comes back to the table better when they're welcomed and hugged and given treats and celebrated, you know?
Oh my gosh, you've said so much, Cher. Like, I'm like, "Yep, yep, 100%." I mean, there is well, like, for one, creativity with I went to art school and being an artist, um, yeah, it's almost like, we become an adult, and then suddenly it's like, "Okay, now you have to be responsible and get a real job," or, whatever it is, and the thing that I didn't know back then, is that when you don't honor the creativity that wants to flow through you, especially if you're a highly creative person, like you are, myself, other artists, people who are naturally very creative, if you don't give it an outlet, it turns in on itself in a
Mhm.
really big way. Like for me, that's how it showed up as struggling with depression. I would just kind of get really down in the dumps and thinking, "Oh, I need to meditate. I need to figure out like what's going on." And rather than, you know, turning towards, okay, maybe I need to paint some more, or I need to get back into drawing, or whatever it is to kind of give that self-expression. And so and then there's the other part too here that you mentioned, you're talking about the professionals of Washington, D.C. So many people don't see themselves as creative. Oh, I'm not creative, or I'm not artistic, or um but then it's like when we get stuck in these little boxes and these roles, I mean, people burn out if you don't have a place, or you're not balancing it with giving yourself the space to really let yourself go, and get out of the roles that you carry. I mean, there's no judgment, there's nothing wrong with having roles, but there's moments that we step into them, right? Like whether you're a mother, or you're a congressman, or whatever. Um, yeah, connecting with that creativity, that inner child, like letting yourself be silly, letting yourself laugh, letting yourself be ridiculous in a place that's appropriate to do that, right? Like we're not going to be ridiculous at work, for example, but I can just feel when you talk about that, like how nourishing and freeing, I'm sure there's probably neuroscience to back this
Mhm.
up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny the way that you just said that. It had me thinking about how, um, just on a day-to-day basis, the outlet is really important, and it's almost to the same effect as how you maybe I'll just speak for myself.
Mm,
I need to get some exercise before I sit down to work. I did not make the room for that for a very, very long time, and when I started to, I was different. My work was different, I was calmer, I slept better, everything changed.
yeah.
And I feel like our creative expression is kind of like that too, where like when we have a way for it to flow in the way that it needs to flow for us, it is almost like a restoration of balance to the rest of our ecosystem. And there's very beautifully said about it turning inward if we aren't letting it go out. I developed an autoimmune disease in my mid 20s, and the kind of like slow walking myself home from that has been really all about actually revaluing that creative expression. And I realize now it's so funny, you go through these cycles of awareness and you make changes in your life, and then you look back and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm like unrecognizable from how I was a couple of years ago." I feel like one thing I've really come to just understand about myself now that is sort of like a fact of life in my world is that creatively, I'm sort of like a great white shark. Like great white sharks need to be moving constantly in order to have oxygen pass properly into their system. They can't, that's why they aren't in aquariums, is because they actually can't be contained. And once I remember
All
learning
of
about that, and
that.
I was like, "Oh,
Totem.
that's why, like, that I'm the sort of person who there's some people who can only do one project at a time or they go crazy. I'm the opposite. I need to have, like, 8 different things cooking so that I feel satiated. Like, that's just kind of how it is, and when I look back, I realized that a lot of what wasn't working for me when that when that was something that hadn't clicked, is that I was just in an environment that did not understand that or value that or support that through no fault of the environment. It was just not the right place.
Mhm.
But yeah, that great white shark thing has changed a lot.
I love that.
I used to be like, am I insane for having 6 different projects?
Nobody
I'm like,
says that shark
no.
is their totem. I love that so much about you. It's just like, yeah, I'm just this big great white shark, you know? Yeah, most people go for, "Oh, I'm a wolf," or, bear, or no, great white shark, okay. Yeah. Um, that's so funny. Yeah, and so okay, so where do we go from here?
Oh, so much to discuss.
So much to talk about. I mean, creativity is such a huge thing. And so it's like you said, I'm the same way, especially if I'm painting. I can't just focus on one painting. Like, oh, I'm gonna do one painting until it's done, and then I'll do the next. Like, I'll have like 4 or 5 going at once. Like, I'll work on it. Okay, give that a break. Take another one, little break. And I too thrive on, So people, I'm definitely multi-passionate. Like, I have so many things that I love to do, and that too can be a challenge, right? Like when you have so much creativity and you have no riverbanks or no
Mhm.
like channels, then your energy can get really scattered and unfocused, right? You're not able to
Mhm.
kind of like complete projects or whatever. Do you encounter that when you're looking at creativity or working with others, like how to harness the creativity so that it's not um, too much? Because I feel like people who have a lot of creativity and kind of thrive on, let's say, chaos can also tend towards creating chaos and drama just to kind of like keep life interesting.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, totally. So, I mean, I love this topic because it speaks to the complexity of being a creative person, where sometimes it can really feel like you just live on a bucking bronco, you know? And there are some times when it's super fun and you're like, oh, the airtime, wee. And there are some times where you're like, wait, whoa, like stop. And there are other times when you're like, I need to get off the bronco for a little bit and take a break. So when I'd like to think about this sort of question kind of through the lens of goal setting, but in a really specific way. Anytime that I'm talking to somebody really creative about a project or a goal or having a different experience with their creativity, I like to first start with not what's the project that you would like to funnel your energy into, but what's the intention for your creativity from your next project? Is
Say
it
that again.
Yeah, what's the intention for your creativity for this next project?
Okay.
So you're kind of getting before we're even talking about the what or the how, we're actually talking about the what for. Like, how is this really in service of me and my relationship with my inner creative genius? There are some times when it's really important to us that we practice producing something. If that's our breakthrough area, that's our stretch, is moving out of having 8 different projects and actually creating something that we can see all the way through. What a great intention.
Mhm.
And if that's what we're working on, we might think about it like, oh, this is not only about achieving this thing or creating this beautiful work of art. This is about me becoming someone who has the experience of finishing their creative work.
Mhm.
And so then you're already starting to think a little bit differently like, oh, this is going to be a stretch for me because I'm going to be going beyond my comfort zone on purpose. And it kind of infuses the goal with a little bit of magic of like transformational zing, because you're already thinking about like, oh, I'm going to have to become something different. That's cool. And
Yeah.
there might be other times when there's actually a huge breakthrough in not over planning or dancing with the universe. So just as an example, um, my second album is like almost done. It's very, very close to being done. And this was one that I had put on my list of goals for 2024, as like, oh, this is just the year that I do this. But then as I was working on it, it ended up becoming this really cool project with a new collaborator. It just took on a little bit of a different life
Yeah.
that if I had been really sticking to my plan would not have been able to happen. And it's been wonderful. Like I never wondered what would I sound like if my songs were kind of more rock songs. I never that thought would have never crossed my mind until like this person crossed my path, and now it's been just the most amazing experience, and it's taken longer, and I've had to become more of a collaborator than I've ever had to be before when it comes to my own work, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is answering your question, but I feel like that's
No, it
that's a
totally does.
cool
Yeah,
outlook, you
I
know?
totally get it, like, the intention, 'cause, yeah, in one moment, it might be that stretching your edge or pushing your creativity into a new channel is to complete something versus, let's say, "Okay, my edge is to collaborate," you know?
Mhm.
How does that open and, challenge my creativity in a way it has yeah, and I can see so many things, or maybe the challenge with your creativity is, just coming up with as many ideas as you possibly can, right? Like, there's all these different ways that creativity is used to meet a goal or meet the intention of what needs to be created in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's as simple as like, "Oh, my stretch is to celebrate how many ideas I have.
Mm,
I'm gonna learn how to luxuriate in my overflow of ideas for a while before trying to pin one down," you
yeah,
know?
yeah. So I'm curious about so do you bring improv into your coaching space with clients?
Yes and no. Like, I think, maybe what I mean by yes and no is more like, um, all the time in an undistinguished way because I think coaching is improvising, and then, bringing it in intentionally, um, I think that's usually for me a little bit more of like a training thing or
Mm,
hosting retreats or
mhm,
stuff
mhm,
like that, or like every once in a while I get to teach improv to improvisers, like in a workshop or something and kind of infuse it with a coaching spin, which
mhm.
is always really cool. It's like my 2 favorite superpowers just getting
Yeah,
smooshed together.
yeah. So what kinda and I'm just really curious, I think I went to one improv class once, like 25 or 30 years ago, um, and, I didn't show up again for whatever reason, but improv to me looks like it's so much fun, um, and there's, like, an element of risk, right, in it, and creativity also has risk, like, it's kind of like a core I feel like it's, how do I wanna say? To me, I feel like it's not real creativity unless there is something that you're risking, right? Like, I if you're gonna push that edge, like you're saying, like, with your project, like, "Oh, I've never done rock music," or whatever, like, that's taking a risk of, like,
Mhm.
"I don't know where it's gonna go," and improv is that, right? Like, you're stepping into this space, you don't know what the other person's gonna say, you're not even knowing what you're gonna say. It's all about being in the totally in the present moment, right? So there's this element of you can't be too in your head because suddenly if you're in your head trying to like, oh, I think it's gonna go this way or that way, you've already lost the moment and you're not
Mhm.
in that flow, which is so much about creativity, like being in flow, being out of flow. So I'm curious, like, in your experience of improv and just play in general, like what kind of transformations happen within your being as a
Oh my
person?
gosh. That question, what kind of transformations happen in your being as a person? This is my kind of question. Because okay, I just wanna be really honest that when I took my first improv class, I was terrified. And I think the reason I took it was because I remember exactly when it was. I was a junior in college and I was working really hard. That was a really intense academic year. And I just remember feeling like very stagnant and I couldn't explain why. And Washington Improv Theater was offering these free intro classes. And I remember seeing it um, online, and I was like, that sounds like the actual scariest thing I could ever possibly imagine doing. Like I have so much experience rehearsing a play, knowing what's going to happen. You know, you have this sense of like security and confidence, which is kind of hilarious because to people who aren't in the performing arts, I think that alone sounds really scary, you know? But
Yeah,
there's like a security in that of like becoming a character. When you're improvising, you just have to be where you are. And it's really confusing.
right.
And
There's no
I
rehearsal.
no, and I like hated it, but loved it. It was sort of like how I felt when I began personal training later in life, where I was like, every part of me hates this, but like loves it. Like I know it's taking me somewhere that I really want to go. So even if it's like, I think my first few years in improv constantly felt like pumping the brakes on the part of me that likes control, just like over and over and over and over, you know? And I took a break from improv while I was living in Manhattan. I took a lot of classes, but I never quite found a community that felt right for me there.
Mm.
And when I moved up here to the Hudson Valley, I had the very like immense luck to find Hudson Valley Improv, which is led by Samantha Jones, who is this just amazing performer, actor, director. She's just kind of a genius. And one of the things that I have really loved about doing improv in this particular community is that the approach is very much based on what's actually real and true in this moment. And it was the most out of your head, into your body improv class I've ever been in my life. And it was so great because I felt like this layer of conditioning come off that I didn't even know was there.
Mm, mhm.
Um, in the improv that I've mostly been brought up in, um, it's so funny because there's like all these layers of getting out of your head. You know, there's like you kind of learn how to play and then you have to practice playing. And then there's like readying for a show where you're trying to produce something that lands for the audience. And that's usually where people go back into their heads because now you're trying to get the roles right and try to get the beats right and try to make it good, you know? So it's sort of this weird thing where like you've done all this work to become vulnerable and try to play and be in the moment. And then all of those filters come back again.
Mm.
But we kind of pretend like it's not true. I don't know. It's like a little bit weird, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so, like, these last couple of years, I've just really enjoyed letting my body be more of a guide. And some some magical like connection between the kind of coaching that I do and getting back into improv. And I think kind of just being, um, like I mentioned when we started our conversation, I'm coming out of a bit of a healing cycle
Mhm.
that had me addressing a lot of stuff in my body that was, I think, in the way of really feeling like a felt sense of joy and like a felt sense of security just on a daily basis. Like I feel like I've really been um, like shaking off a lot of the dust and the rocks that have just been there for a while. And improv has been such a cool way to practice letting that happen more. In fact, I have this fantasy of leading like a workshop for advanced improvisers called Frontiers of Joy, where we would actually
Wow,
use,
I
wouldn't that
love
be
that
so
title.
neat? Like with that like angle of like having it be a place where you are using improv to actually let yourself experience more joy than you allow.
Oh my gosh. Well, and before we got on this call, we were just talking about, like, I asked, "Well, how are you?" I'm like, "Yeah, life at home is pretty peaceful, it's good, but yeah, outside world," I'm like, "Yeah, not so much right now," right? And I think that, um it's like joy is the antidote, I really feel, like, to in response to what is really being thrown in our faces. Like, there's so much despair, there's so much overwhelm, like, there's serious tragedies going on, and we can let that weigh us down, and like you said, like and it becomes it goes unaware. It's like we kinda just accept like, "Oh, yeah, this is how life is," and then it's like you said, like, the dust just kinda starts to collect and
Mhm.
and before we know it, we're just kind of like just kinda going through the motions, and we've lost our connection, and radically saying yes to our joy, even in the face of so much craziness, and there's something really powerful about that, and so when you said, like, frontiers of joy, like, that's really it, is us just, I think there's a reclamation of our power of, like, I'm not gonna let my circumstances, um, define how I show up and who I'm being, and yeah, and I'm still gonna smile, and I'm still gonna bring joy into the spaces and to the people in my life, and it's definitely something that is cultivated, and that's kind of what I see in you is that you've always, you're so committed into staying in connection with cultivating creativity and play. So like even when you were faced with the nodules in your vocal cords, you still had a knowing of like, this can't be the end of my expression. I think of my son who in high school, he really like, he loved basketball and so much, and in a way, athletes are similar, right? Because 'Cause they're so in the moment. You can't think.
Mhm.
You're just in it, and you're responding in the moment every single second, right?
And
And
there's
it
that beautiful group mind on a team.
yeah, and it's your
Yeah.
own, there's connection and, um, and, he had a big dream, and it was just like obstacle after obstacle, like crappy coach, like wet rag coach, like so uninspiring. They lost every single game for years, just like maybe they won 1 or 2. I mean, it was so disheartening and so frustrating because he's just like, "God, I just wanna, like, where's the fire?" The guy just didn't have any fire,
Mhm.
and then he tore his meniscus in one knee, and then a couple years later, tore the other meniscus, and it's like, um and instead of, like, crumbling and just being like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm just not doing sports anymore." He hit the gym, he's, like, into, making himself stronger, and now I mean, yeah, he's not playing at, like, a collegiate level, or anything like that, but he is playing, the city level, he is finding spaces where he can satisfy that passion that he has, and so, um, anyway, just I guess I just have to throw it out there to anyone, like, that you do have a choice of, like, when life throws you curveballs, like, how do you respond? Are you just gonna
Mhm.
collapse and shut down, or are you just gonna kind of roll with the punches and, well, what are the other ways I can express, like, "Okay, I thought it was gonna be this, maybe it's this for a little while," just trusting the journey.
Oh, 100%. Oh my gosh, your son's so cool, so
Yeah.
resilient. It's amazing. Yes to everything you said. A couple of things that made me think of. First off, there we talk on my podcast, West of Wonderland. I'm just repping it a little bit with my
Yeah.
little sweatshirt here.
Nice. Oh,
Um, we talk a lot about dreams on West of Wonderland and about how there's this weird thing that occurs between being a kid with a dream and then an adult with a dream where like we're supposed to be differently
mm,
now that we're an adult, our dream has a different weight. And
mhm.
in my book, How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise, there is like a good amount. I spent a lot of time with
Got
the
tingles with that.
really,
Yes.
I personally
Say the
think
name
it's a
again,
great
please.
title. How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise. It's so real, isn't it? It's like the realist. The realist. Yeah, so I in the book I talk a lot about how um when you're an artistic person, you're an artistic teenager,
Mm,
suddenly this thing occurs where your passion for the thing that you do is no longer enough to be the reason why you do it.
mm, mm,
And it sucks because you love playing the violin, but you're not first chair. So where's it going? It's like this bait
mm,
and switch that happens.
yeah.
It takes something that you love so purely and turns it into something else.
Mhm,
And I think that a lot of us in our adult lives, like we spend a lot of time reacting to that and trying to come back or trying to find some other like explanation.
right.
And so much of my work, whether it's the book or my courses or any of that, is really geared toward the like loving reclamation of what it is before it became something else. And I just think it's so, I mean, that's my journey with singing. A million billion percent. It's like that's what it is. And I also wanted to say, um, to the point about there being a lot of turmoil and a
Mm,
lot of suffering right now. Um, I spent a lot of time in my life wondering about like, when how dare I be well or how dare I be
mm,
joyful with all these other things going on. And I think it's important to reflect on that and to ask a question because I think it does the whole world a disservice when we just shut it out and we're like, I'm entitled to my joy and I'm not going to pay attention. And it's like,
mhm, mhm,
that's not square with my values as a global citizen. I'm not going to pretend like I'm
yeah,
not affected by the world and I don't affect the world. I don't think change happens that way. You know, I think that for me personally, I
mm,
know when I am connected with my joy and I'm taking care of myself, I can handle stuff
mm,
and I can be of service and I can have tough conversations, to your point about earlier about it being like a need that really needs to get met. I am a different person in my community when my joy is flowing and I have access to it. And so I think these days in particular, it's really easy to like let the man get you down. It's like so easy. I've
yeah,
been telling all of my clients like I've been really um particular about like when I take in news right now just because of first of all the content of the news is horrifying and secondly the like very like pernicious energy with which it's given. It's really hard to digest.
yeah,
It's hard.
yeah.
And I got this little device that's called a brick and it's like
I've
this. Have you
heard of
heard of
it.
this?
I've heard of it, but I've never used it.
Well, let me sing their praise. I should be a brick affiliate for how often I talk about this. It's so great because you can limit your access to different, apps on your phone,
Mhm,
and you have to disable it physically by tapping it on the device. So you
mhm,
can't just be sitting on your couch, "You know what? I am gonna go into the news app, or I am gonna go scroll on this app." You have to get up and physically make the change in order to do it, and I've become so much more productive, but it also means that when I'm like looking at the news, it means I know that I'm going to pay attention to the important stuff. I'm not just receiving everything all the time. It's like, I think it's really helped me protect my energy. And it means that I'm ready to handle the horrors of the world when I meet them. Like do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah,
Hmm.
well, it's like you're being more intentional, with your yeah, with your time and your energy and what you're taking in. It's so easy to just it's, it's seductive and it lures you in,
Hmm.
and then you're just but if you're like, "Okay, I have a limited amount of time. What is the information I wanna
Hmm.
access for this time that I have? I'm not here to just idly, passively consume." So
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I worked with a coach where she mentioned that she would say, "Oh, well, yeah, I have Facebook, bricked, So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna have access to your messages until such and such a time or whatever it was. I was like,
Mhm.
"God, that sounds amazing." Like, it's so true. It's yeah, the our little devices are can be, if they're not used intentionally, just, yeah, a big energy suck, which then also, um, zaps our creativity. It
Mhm.
zaps our our desire to get up and do something, create something.
Totally.
I
Totally. I think, like, so much of it is, like, the bricking practice that I have is, um, it's not just the knowledge that the internet makes us insane, which I think it does,
Mhm.
but, it's also the self-awareness of, like, what I'm gonna do with access to it,
Yeah.
you know? So, I mean, a lot of that is in the book about, like, learning about, what are the different ecosystems in my life? What's playing into it? How can I become a better steward for my own energy? Anyway, it's a cool book. It's like a short read and lots of exercises and how-tos and stuff like that. And, especially because I don't know how this is for you, but for me, um, I am really committed to intentionally using the internet for good.
Mm.
Really, really committed. So, I'm not shutting down my Instagram. I am gonna brick my Instagram from time to time so that it doesn't drive me insane, Like, the other day we did a, sweatshirt giveaway for West of Wonderland,
Uh-huh.
and it was really fun watching people comment, but I was starting to feel like I was just, like, eating sugar in my brain,
Yeah.
so I just bricked it. I was like, "The responses will be there tomorrow. I
Yep.
cannot do this to myself," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, I do
Yeah.
that sometimes when I'm, like, doing a course launch. I, like, put everything up and then I brick for the
Yeah.
rest of the day. It's just like,
Yeah,
"Don't look."
it's just like it's almost like it's just yeah, it is. It's totally a sugar. You're like, "Oh, but wait,
Yeah.
what's
I
happening now?
know.
What's happening now?" Yeah. So, Laura, how can so you have a program called Uncover Your Creative Magic?
Oh,
Correct?
yeah. So that's a free little mini course. So,
Okay.
Uncover Your Creative Magic, it's at laurawestman.com/uncover. And it's really cool. I have a series of little videos, and it kind of takes you on a treasure map around some different landmarks in your life to uncover your creative magic. And yeah, and then there's my book, How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise, which is unfortunately only buyable through Amazon. I'm still trying to figure out how to not have that be the case, but that is the simplest way to get it
Okay.
is through Amazon. And I have a course as well called Creative Clear Out that is kind of like the not to be gross, but it is a little bit like a colonic for your creative self where you're just like,
Yeah.
taking everything out of the
Maybe for
closet.
next time, you know?
Yeah, and like kind of helping people get back into sustainable routines for their creativity and um I think
Awesome.
it's really cool. I think
Awesome.
it's really cool.
It sounds yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, it's like totally get it. Sometimes we do just need to like, okay, big flush and like, okay, what are we really doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just so much we can do when we're tapped into that, and I never want anyone to feel like they have to stay muted creatively. It just life is too short. The
Yeah.
world needs our creative magic more than ever right now. That's the only way that we get to move ourselves forward as a community. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Laura, I just love your energy. You're so magnetic and I love your passion and just what you stand for and the work that you're doing is so important. So yeah, anybody who's watching this, if you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to tap into, definitely check Laura out at her website, laurawestman.com. And Laura, any final words or anything you want to leave the audience with?
Oh, well, thank you, first of
You're
all.
welcome.
Yeah. And secondly, I think the thing I want to leave everybody with is that there's no wrong way to be creative. There's not. There's no wrong way. So follow your instincts, and it's going to lead somewhere great.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. And thanks to everyone for watching. And until next time. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
Bye.